turned on the faucet. Nothing. The water was gone. And on the door, there was a note. You have exceeded the limit. Pay a $5,000 fine. What limit? I'm the chief engineer of the water utility. But they had no idea that their new rules would soon turn against them. Life in a small but cozy town had always seemed stable and predictable to Henry Maxwell. Here, people knew each other by name, stores operated on schedule, and public utilities did their job without unnecessary fuss. For Henry, the chief engineer of the city's water utility, it was a peaceful and steady life. He was a man who understood water better than most people understood their own breathing. After 20 years on the job, he knew every pipe, every valve, every reservoir that supplied homes with clean drinking water. Any malfunction, any deviation in pressure, he could pinpoint the problem in seconds and solve it faster than the local authorities could even grasp that something had gone wrong. Henry lived in a prestigious part of town, a neighborhood of spacious homes where residents seemed to enjoy a life free of minor inconveniences. This area was managed by the HOA, led by Randall Hayes, a man known for his love of strict regulations, additional fees, and fines for any deviation from the established norms. Most residents tolerated his methods, unwilling to get entangled in the bureaucratic web he had spun around himself, but Henry had never dealt with him personally. Until this morning. When he woke up, the day seemed ordinary. He stretched, yawned, walked to the kitchen, and turned on the faucet to pour himself a glass of water. Nothing. Not a drop. Frowning in surprise, he checked the bathroom. Dry as well. He stepped outside to test the garden hose. Again, nothing. Henry lifted his head and looked around the yard. His neighbors had water. He could hear Mrs. Carlyle watering her lawn with an automatic sprinkler. Over the fence, he could see Mr. Phillips washing his car. So, the shutdown was only for him? A cold unease crept up the back of his neck, a sense of foreboding settling in as he approached his front door. There was a note pinned to it, a crisp white sheet with bold, impersonal text. Water service has been disconnected due to excessive consumption. Please report to the HOA office to settle your outstanding balance. Henry frowned. Excessive consumption? Outstanding balance? He had always paid on time. Instinctively, he pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. Last payment processed. Bills cleared. He took a deep breath. All right. Maybe it was a mistake. These things happen. But why hadn't he received any prior notice? Why was he only finding out after his water had been cut off? His unease deepened. Henry wasn't the kind of man who lost his temper easily, but right now, irritation was brewing in his chest. He despised injustice, especially when it affected him personally. Throwing on his jacket, he headed for the HOA office, determined to resolve the situation calmly. But within minutes, his irritation would turn into full-blown rage. Henry threw open the HOA office door. Behind a massive reception desk, the secretary sat glued to her computer screen, not even bothering to glance up. The air carried the faint scent of cheap coffee and old paper files. "I need to see Randall Hayes," he said firmly. The secretary lazily lifted her gaze. "He's busy. You'll need to schedule an appointment." "Perfect. Let him know I'll be waiting right here until I speak with him." Henry crossed his arms over his chest. That was all it took. A few minutes later, the office door cracked open, and there stood Hayes himself, a man with a shiny bald head, a smug expression, and an unnecessarily pompous posture. "Ah, Mr. Maxwell, I was expecting you," he sneered. Henry stepped inside and shut the door behind him. The office was standard. Wooden desk, cluttered with documents, folders, and a leather notebook. Behind the desk, the HOA logo hung on the wall, accompanied by a small plaque. Randall Hayes, HOA President. Hayes leaned back in his chair, deliberately drawing out the silence to emphasize his sense of control. "Where's my water?" Henry got straight to the point. Your water." Hayes sighed theatrically, shaking his head as if feigning concern. "You see, we have a little problem. You exceeded the limit." "What limit?" Henry's brows knitted together. "Well, the limit we set for larger homes. You use 3 times more water than your neighbors. That's suspicious. You might have a leak, and we simply can't allow unpaid water consumption." Henry felt something tighten inside him. "Are you serious? I'm the city's water utility engineer. I know exactly how much I use and I have no leaks. I pay for exactly what I consume." "Oh, I don't doubt that," Hayes said with an indifferent shrug, pushing aside a folder. "But you see, Mr. Maxwell, we recently introduced a new policy. Large homes now fall under a special rate, and if you don't agree—" He paused, tilting his head slightly forward. "Then that's your problem." A heavy silence filled the office. Henry felt a cold wave of fury crawl up his spine. $5,000. Not a fine for an actual violation, not an extra charge for exceeding usage, just a mandatory entry fee into a system that Hayes had crafted for his own gain. This wasn't just abuse of power, this was extortion. Henry clenched his fists but kept his composure. He knew many of his neighbors were afraid to challenge the HOA. They had learned the hard way that Hayes could cut off power without warning, impose fabricated fines, or even file lawsuits over unpaid dues. People had become prisoners of his bureaucratic dictatorship. But there was one thing Hayes didn't know. He thought he had everyone under his thumb, but he had no idea he was talking to the man who controlled the city's entire water supply. Henry exhaled slowly, suppressing his anger. Hayes thought he could play his little games. Well then, Henry would play his own. Henry walked out of the HOA office with a stone-cold expression. He didn't say a word, didn't give Hayes even the slightest hint of his intentions. That's how professionals operate. Back home, he headed straight to the basement, where the central water supply point for his property was located. He knew this system better than anyone in town. Turning on his flashlight, he carefully inspected the pipes. No leaks, no malfunctions. The water was flowing perfectly. Hayes had lied. This wasn't a system failure. It wasn't overuse. It was pure extortion. Henry slowly ran his hand over the copper pipes. They were solid, reliable, just like him. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and logged into the city's water dispatch system. He knew exactly how the water network worked, how every pipe connected, how the pressure was distributed, and, most importantly, which emergency codes could be entered into the system to officially cut off water to specific areas. And, most crucially, he knew how to do it in a way that Hayes would never be able to prove anything. Henry created a new service request. Pump station number 3 malfunction. Due to load redistribution, the main pipes in HOA complex name are experiencing temporary pressure reduction. Reason: water supply instability caused by recalculation of new tariff rates. Estimated resolution time unknown. He clicked confirm. Water for the entire housing complex disappeared. At first, no one noticed. Maybe it was just a brief outage. It happens. But after 30 minutes, the residents started realizing something was wrong. They turned on their faucets. Nothing. They tried to take a shower. Still nothing. They flushed their toilets. And that's when panic began to spread. An hour later, the first complaints started flooding the HOA chat. Does anyone else have no water? Is this some kind of shutdown? Why weren't we warned? I was in the shower with shampoo in my hair. What the hell? Hayes, what the hell is going on? Randall Hayes sat in his office, jaw clenched, reading the messages. He immediately called the city water department. Is this a temporary failure? When will it be fixed? But the voice on the other end was icy and emotionless. Your area is listed as having reduced pressure. The official documentation states that the cause is load redistribution due to new tariff calculations. If you have questions, please contact the water utility. The water utility? Hayes hung up the phone. A cold knot of fear tightened in his stomach. Henry. It was him. This was his doing. But how? How had he done it so perfectly, so that everything looked official? Meanwhile, his office phone started ringing. Then ringing again. Then again. Dozens of calls. The phone wouldn't stop. The residents were furious. Their patience had snapped. Across town, Henry sat in his living room sipping coffee. He wasn't in a hurry. He was waiting. Waiting for the moment Hayes would realize that this problem wasn't going to be fixed in an hour. or 2. The water wasn't coming back until Henry got what he wanted. By noon, the HOA office looked like a besieged fortress. The narrow hallway leading to the reception area was packed with dozens of furious residents. Their faces were twisted with rage. Some waved their arms angrily, others clutched empty water bottles, and a few held damp towels fresh from interrupted showers. The sweltering heat only fueled their fury. "Where's the water?" someone shouted. "I can't even wash my face. What the hell is this?" "You're going to pay for this." Randall Hayes sat in his office, drowning in incoming calls. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Angry residents calling nonstop. In the reception area, his secretary, pale and visibly shaken, watched the chaos escalate outside. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'll handle it," Hayes gritted out, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He straightened his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped out. The moment he appeared, a wave of furious shouting crashed over him. "You need to fix this now!" "Turn the water back on! This is illegal! We pay a fortune to live here and we can't even flush our toilets!" Hayes raised his hands, trying to calm them. "Please, I assure you, it's just a minor technical issue. Everything will be restored soon." But the crowd wasn't having it. "What technical issue? Our pipes are fine, we checked. Either you fix this immediately or we file a collective complaint." And then the office door swung open. Henry walked in. The crowd fell silent. Hayes locked eyes with him and felt a cold sweat break out on his back. Henry calmly stepped forward, standing in the center of the room. He crossed his arms over his chest and, in a slow, dangerously calm voice, said, "Randall, I heard we have water limits in the neighborhood now. Well, it looks like we've reached the limit." Hayes went pale. The crowd erupted. "What limit? What is he talking about? Wait, they shut off our water? Oh my God. They just screwed themselves." Hayes clenched his jaw. "You did this?" he hissed, trying to keep his voice steady, but his eyes were already filled with fear. Henry shrugged. "Well, since we're playing by your rules, I'm simply following the new policy." And that's when the crowd understood. Realization spread through the room like an explosion. The residents' anger toward Hayes boiled over, and then they snapped. "Turn the water back on! You break your own rules but fine us? We're reporting you to the authorities." For the first time, Randall Hayes, who had ruled over this place unchecked, was backed into a corner. "Wait, let's talk about this calmly," he started, but it was already too late. "Calmly? You've been extorting us for months. Illegal fines, extra fees. This is fraud. You will pay for this." The crowd closed in. His secretary shrunk behind the desk, watching everything spiral out of control, and Hayes knew he had lost. He wasn't in charge anymore. All right, he yelled, throwing his hands up. "I'll cancel everything. It's over." But no one was listening anymore. 30 minutes later, water was restored. The residents, relieved but still fuming, went back to their homes. Their anger wasn't gone. Hayes knew the scandal wasn't going away. Within a week, he resigned. Then, he disappeared from town. Back home, Henry turned on the faucet. Water gushed out in a steady, strong stream. He smirked and exhaled. Justice was restored.